Hello, and welcome to Legislative Update. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television, and it's our great pleasure to welcome back Congressman Vern Buchanan to give us some insight and some wisdom about what's going on not only in our congressional district, but also in Washington. Congressman, welcome back.
It's always been fun to be on your show, and thanks for all you do for Manatee County. It's huge.
Well, I just certainly appreciate that. But Congressman, you've certainly been a busy man. You're now in your 13th year as the congressman for the 16th district, and we want to talk about some of the great accomplishments that have occurred, and some of the things that you're working on, and some of the things that are of great concern to you. But before we get started and get into the questions, you know, you've always been a big advocate of bipartisanship, and you've talked about it many, many times. Well, these days, that doesn't seem to be the fact in Washington. And especially these days with the talk of impeachment or an impeachment inquiry, things are going a little bit haywire. What's your impression of what's going on in Washington during this impeachment look, and how do you see it turning out?
Well, impeachment is a political event. I'm not into that. I mean, the bottom line is that people want us to work together on a bipartisan basis. You know, Charles, I co-chair the delegation with another Democrat, but at the end of the day, people want us to get things done. We'll talk about some of the other things we're getting done, but they want to find a way to lower our costs. They want to make sure Medicare and Social Security are viable long-term. They want to make sure veterans, the commitments we've made to them, that we keep. So there's a lot of things they want us to work together on. Unfortunately, this is all about politics. And less than a year, we'll be voting. Right. So it gives the people an opportunity to weigh in on all of this and decide on who they want as the next president for 4 years. And I think that's where the mindset should be, not all this nonsense, political nonsense that's going on right now. They sent us up there with the new Congress and the new House to get things done. That's what people care about. I think people are tired of it and want us to move on and get something done. And then come next November, we'll decide on the next 4 years.
And I think that's a very good point, sir, as you want people to move forward. There's a lot of things that are pending that need, you know, your attention, the Senate's attention. You know, one of the great things that comes to mind is infrastructure, you know, and there's been a lot of talk about that, but hardly any movement so far.
But roads, I just say infrastructure, roads and bridges are a big thing, lowering cost, making sure we're doing everything we can for our seniors. And so there's a lot of things that we need to be doing together. And by the way, there are some things getting done, but unfortunate, the impeachment's taken the center stage, which people are very, I think, disillusioned about the whole thing.
And thank you for sharing that with us, Congressman. But you know, we'll go from that side of the news, which is a kind of a negative perspective, and I want you to share with us some good news that you've just actually found out about today, and that's a new business that's going to be starting right here in Manatee County with a huge investment and a great opportunity for jobs and a great opportunity for this community. Yeah. Please tell us a little bit about that.
I just came back. We kind of dedicated the facility out there in terms of, even though it's a couple of years off, but one of the companies in Florida is going to commit $350 million to a facility. It's going to be jobs and opportunities. It's going to pay $1.5 million into the Treasury here in Manatee County, which will go towards roads and other things. They're going to build the largest battery park. So if you're environmentally sensitive in terms of where we need to go, they got a couple of big stacks out there in Parrish. Those will disappear because they use oil to fuel those. And well, the idea is with the batteries, because they got a big solar park out there, you can't store the energy. So the way to store it is with batteries. So myself and some Democrats were all working together to try to create the credits to make sure that we can encourage not only the battery technology there, but all across America. So the idea is that in terms of fuel, is look at more alternatives And obviously that's important to a lot of people in this county. And that big investment, the biggest battery in the world, is going to be right here. And I tell people that in terms of the investment, if you look at the new mall put out there, UTC,
right,
that was $30 million. This is $350 million in Manatee County, clean energy.
And you know, that's a very good point that you made, sir, because it is clean energy, and that's the way of the future. People are interested and they're focused on creating good energy sources. Get out of the fossil fuel business and create some sources that are clean and energy-wise. So this is amazing news for Manatee County, and I think through your leadership and the vision and your collective efforts, this will go forward.
It's not going to change everything overnight,
Sure,
but it's moving in that direction. It's a small percentage when you look at solar and wind, some of the other alternatives, but this will help it become a bigger thing, and it'll lower the prices, they're telling me, in terms of what people are going to pay for energy and clean energy. So I think it's a win-win all the way around. That technology is here today. We're going to take advantage of it.
And again, sir, you know, hats off to you for your efforts in making this happen. But you know, if that was the only thing that you've accomplished, that would be just terrific. That would be a huge thing. But you know, if I may, I'd like to kind of go through some of the things that you've accomplished during your tenure as a congressman. And I want to try to get as many in as possible. Your representation has been very important to this community. Right off the bat, the dredging of Wares Creek was a major thing. Wares Creek sat dormant for years, for decades, before the federal.
Well, for 25 years or 30 years, they were trying to get it done. When I came as a member of Congress,
right,
everybody came to me and I said, I work for the people, for the elected officials here in the city and county governments. And I asked Manatee County, what's your biggest issue? And they said, Wares Creek. Right. It's a big lift. It's $50 million. But if that's something you can help us with, because they had flooding in the Bradenton area and impacting homes and everything, and we were able to get that done collectively, but I kind of helped lead the charge.
And have you seen Wares Creek lately? I mean, it's a night and day change. It's the water is clean, it's flowing, and they don't have the same flooding issues as they once had. But Wares Creek was a major undertaking, from the Manatee County, but without federal help, it could not have been done.
We got the Army Corps of Engineers. They brought them in my office, and I said, enough's enough. We need to, this is something that's critical to our community. It's something we've been asking for a long time. It's been put off. The time is now. And we were able to finesse them and get that done.
Well, another thing, and I know this is very dear to your heart, is the fact that you secured federal funding for the Sarasota National Cemetery, which is a beautiful facility, and it's much needed in this community with 40,000 veterans in Manatee alone, another 50,000 in Sarasota. It's great to have a facility like the Sarasota National Cemetery. With the help of the Patterson Foundation and the federal money that you were available to fund, it's now a beautiful place for our community and our veterans.
Well, a lot of our veterans used to go up to Pinellas County, right, but that was full. And some that are up there are down here. But my congressional district, you've mentioned Manatee's got 40,000, but I got 88,000. And that was their top priority for a lot of them, is whether it's themselves someday or their parents. My parents, my dad was in the Navy during World War II. He's out there, but a lot of other people are out there. And you mentioned Patterson Foundation. They committed originally it was going to be $6, $8 million, $12 million to make it like over the top, fabulous art, the cathedral and everything that they've put out there. But it's unbelievable, and if you haven't been there, it's just worse to go there. It's just such, it's a feeling that you get when you're on those grounds is very special feeling.
And again, through your efforts, that's a place for veterans to gather. There's just a funeral for a veteran out there not too long ago, and it was packed with people that attended. But your efforts on behalf of the National Cemetery are to be rewarded, sir, and it means a great deal to veterans throughout this community and their survivors as well.
Yeah, by the way, that veteran had no family, so they go out there. We work with a lot of veterans, unfortunately, that don't have family, and we send someone as a representative from our office and then try to work with various branches of service out there that can dedicate that properly.
Again, hats off to you for accomplishing that. We want to talk a little bit more about veterans a little bit later on another issue as well. But again, sir, you didn't stop there. One of the key things that you've been involved with is beach renourishment. Manatee County is a beach community, so Sarasota. With the storms and beach erosion, it's very important to keep that because it's a big moneymaker for the island to have beautiful beaches. So you've been involved with beach renourishment for many, many years.
When you look at the port and all the beach renourishment projects, that one year we had $150 million in projects
Sure.
going on, but I know like on the beaches in Anna Maria Island, one woman came up to me and there was really little or no beach left. It was up to the road. The water was flowing over. She had a house right on the other side of the road. And she said that the value of her home has fallen so much, it was like $47,000. We put a new beach out there with two football fields almost straight out. She said she'd get $200,000 for her home. But just more importantly, or just as important, for every dollar we put on the beach, we get back $8 in terms of tourism, in terms of businesses, and we got the best beaches, I think, in the planet, right in that area, in that region, that Anna Maria down to, Siesta Key.
Exactly.
You can't find anything that's any better than that in terms of beaches. It's a big asset in many fronts.
And having a good beach renourishment plan like that, tourism is a huge factor, not only for the entire state, but for this area. And recently the Tourist Development Council has reported that tourism is way up, way over the top, and without a good beach renourishment ongoing plan, that may not be the case.
When you really think about my congressional district, when you look at Sarasota Bay,
right,
and then the homes that face that, and then the homes that face back towards downtown Bradenton or whatever, and then the Gulf side, I have more waterfront anywhere in the country. And I'd only add one other thing: is water quality is the number one issue, frankly, in our region, because without that, it'll reduce everything in half. It'd kill our economy, kill home pricing and values. And so it's really critical, and we've worked aggressively on that.
Well, that was my next question, sir. You talk about the benefits of beach renourishment, but the flip side of that is red tide. And Manatee County, Sarasota County, all experienced red tide. It was devastating. It was devastating for businesses. It was devastating for tourism. But you've been very closely involved with trying to find ways and means, to stem that. You work very closely with MOTE, to help with their research and efforts on behalf of red tide. Tell us a little bit about why that is so important for you to look at red tide and try to find a way to solve this.
Well, before I got in this crazy business, I was on MOTE maybe 8-9 years. I was vice chairman, probably going to be chairman. But as a kid that grew up in kind of the Detroit area in Michigan, I remember Lake Erie was totally polluted. If you swam in it, you had to be very careful. You caught a fish, you couldn't eat it, mercury content. And I don't want that to be in this region. The whole state of Florida, the peninsula,
right,
it impacts so many people in so many different ways. It's the number one issue, I think, that we all got to come together. I'm glad the state put together $12 million for MOTE. I got $8 million for various research on my bill, another $100 million that we've got from out of the Congress on a bipartisan basis. But we've got to do everything we can to protect our coastline, but also Lake Okeechobee and others, because if it's bad there, people sometimes can't make the difference. It's like what happened with the BP spill.
Exactly.
Even though those tar balls rolled up on the beaches in Pensacola and didn't hit our area, but a lot of people canceled a lot of activities because of that. So water quality, I think, is the biggest issue, and I'm very happy to see the state, the federal, all of us working together and realizing that it's a gigantic asset, not just for our generation, but for our kids and grandkids.
And I think you're right, sir. Again, with your leadership and kind of vision for the future, is that there's a greater awareness now about the importance of water quality. And you're right. It's just not along the shoreline. You got to look at Lake Okeechobee and see how we can stem any kind of pollution that's emanating from there. But we've been very fortunate this year that there hasn't been a red tide. But we've had blooms. We've had algae blooms. I think it was just in the paper the other day. Do you have some initiatives that are happening in Washington right now to kind of help research and science take a look at this?
We're getting the money for the algae blooms and everything else, and I've told the scientists at Moat and other places, you have to tell us what it is. I mean, I talked to 10 people, and 10 people have 10 different opinions what's causing it. But I do know this: in 1970, there was 7 million people in Florida. Today, there's 22 million.
Right.
It doubles in the season.
Right.
So there's got to be a factor within that. But there's a lot of multiple factors. What's coming down the Mississippi, there's a dead zone when it gets to the Gulf of 100 miles, 125 miles. Right. And the circulation of that, what's coming out of Lake Okeechobee over into Fort Myers, and fertilizers, a lot of things. So I've made it clear to all the scientists, you tell us on the top 3 or 4 things, and I'll help you get the money, myself and others, to make sure we can do what we can to minimize it. You're not going to get rid of red tide totally.
It's a
I've talked to
natural
them all.
occurring thing.
Yeah, they're saying it's been around for 1,000 years or whatever it's been. But we can minimize it. It has got worse, and we've got to figure a way. This last bout's the worst I've ever seen it, and we've got to take it very seriously, and I am.
And one of the other contributing factors there is that there's health risk involved with the red tide as well, and the algae blooms. So any efforts that can be made in trying to mitigate the circumstances is a great thing.
Well, that's one of the efforts that we've got going on right now, and someone's got to ask the question, and I have, with the idea that we've got a bill and we're going to try to get funding in terms of looking at the health risks for especially seniors or people that have at-risk issues. So I'm very happy to see that's moving in the right direction.
I want to switch gear here a little bit into another crisis situation that you've been a big force to try to solve, and that's the heroin epidemic. It seems to have settled down a little bit, but it's still a crisis situation, especially with the addition of fentanyl that comes into the equation. And I know you helped bring federal funding to this area to kind of confront that at the local level. But you're also working to stop drugs coming in from other countries, specifically China. And tell us how that is working.
Well, I'll just tell you that originally started out with all these pill mills. We had 1,300 of them.
Correct.
Myself and some others got involved with the Attorney General in more pill mills than McDonald's. So we shut down a lot of that. Then it started coming with heroin coming in from Mexico into our community. And then the fentanyl, and they say fentanyl's 50 times greater, more powerful than heroin. So we've got a bill, a STOP Act, that basically, and a lot of it's just flowing in from China. They bring it on, packages and different things. So we've got a bill to work with them to try to minimize it or cut it out. And if they don't, we'll have to have sanctions or something else. But that's a big issue. But we're losing too many of our young people. And unfortunately, Manatee County, for one reason or another, is out of 67 counties in the state. It seems like it's been hit the hardest. It really and we're trying to do everything we can to minimize it, stop the drug flow from China, Mexico. But it's still a big challenge. You can't discount it. I've gone to a lot of the different facilities. There's nothing more painful. I've met a lot of mothers. They've lost their sons or daughters, and it's unbelievable.
And I know that Sheriff Wells and Sheriff Knight are doing everything that they can to stop the flow of that. It just seems to be such a wave of drugs that come in. And you're right, for whatever reason, Manatee and to a degree Sarasota County, they seem to be up there in the number of people that are finding this drug and using it. And we've got to find a way to stop it.
I've never seen it as bad. I talk to the sheriffs and work closely with them, make sure they have the resources they need. I've never seen it as bad, but we're all working together. It seems like you stop one area, the pill mills, and then something else comes up. And not that that's still not an issue, but we've shut down a lot of that. I can tell you, meeting with hospitals here, Manatee Memorial and others, the protocol they're using, because you take some of these pills, and the first time you take it, 10% can get hooked. The second time, they're saying 20%.
Yeah.
So very powerful and addictive and deadly. And so we are doing a lot of things to make a difference. And where I don't really like trial lawyers, but the bottom line, some of these trial lawyers are going after some of the different drug companies from a standpoint of, there is some responsibility to go around all these deaths and the impacts it's having on the families and the community. So it's something we have to take a look at. That's not the only factor, but it is a factor.
And I think you're right. Big Pharma, is you made billions and billions of dollars off the sale of opioids in the past, and there's some accountability that these companies must share. And I think
the drugs, in terms of the pain, you need some of that. I mean, I've had back problems, and there's some of that you need. But I think the protocols, and a lot of people are buying the pills through these pill mills. There's 1,300 of them. They're just able to get them out of the drugstores. You go on one side, put the prescription, the next side you drive out, and you go up to Kentucky and you sell them. So it's become a big business, but we've shut down a lot of that. But we do have the problem with the heroin and the fentanyl, and we're trying to do what we can to minimize that as well.
So, sir, I'd like to take a moment, if we could, talk a little bit about veterans. I know you're a big supporter of veterans. You're at most veteran events that occur. You started the Veteran ID card effort on your behalf. You've done an awful lot for them. But there's one segment that's happening throughout the country, but here in Manatee and Sarasota County, and that's the number of suicides by veterans. The numbers are staggering. I think that at one point somebody said that the more veterans have died of suicide in a certain time period than died in Vietnam. It's a combination of post-traumatic stress, drugs, alcohol, homelessness, but it's an epidemic that's occurring. And I know the Department of Defense has got some new initiatives that are starting. What would you like to see that kind of help stem this tide of veteran suicides?
Well, I think what's happened is, that's not the only point, but a lot of them 18, 20, 21 years old, and they run into issues mentally and emotionally and physical. Maybe they get hit and they start up on, I think, some of the pills, and they get addicted on them. Right. So I think one of the things, I've got a bill out there that is looking the linkage between the veteran and a lot of these prescription drugs, because I think that's a big factor, but it's not the only factor. But you just can't imagine an 18 or 20-year-old and they're in a foxhole and the guy next to him gets shot, his friend, and how they deal with that. I don't even know how they deal with it. I've had friends, because I was in that era, the Vietnam era, that had those scenarios. Some can cope with it, move on. A lot of them can't. So I think there's a lot of people that are under that kind of pressure. We need to do everything we can for our veterans, especially the veterans that are just coming home. And I think we do a good job, but we need to do more.
And I think something that I heard on the news is that, we have the Vietnam era people who, for a wide variety of reasons are committing suicide, whether it's, drugs or alcohol or a combination of that. But then you have the generation behind that, the people who served in Afghanistan and Iraq and everything like that. That next generation of warriors, they're experiencing the same set of circumstances, depression, anxiety. And I really do think that, it has to start at the unit level, perhaps, for people to get good counseling before, they get to a point where they're so depressed there's no way out for them.
Yeah. And any of the veterans in this region, we have someone, Joni, that works with all of our veterans, been with me from day one. I would ask any of your listeners, if someone's got a challenge and they feel like we're not doing enough, come to our office. I'll be glad to meet with them, or our staff will, and just see what more we could do to help them, because there is help out there. We just built a brand new facility up the road, just a little bit north of Manatee County in Hillsborough, southern Hillsborough County, in my congressional district, 60,000 square feet.
Wow.
So a lot more of those services can be handled right there. You don't have to go to downtown Tampa or Pinellas County. And so I'm very excited about our just dedicated that new facility. If you
Congratulations.
Haven't been there, you need to get out there and show the veterans, but it's incredible the capability they have. So
we have some information about your district offices, both your Sarasota and your Manatee County district offices. We're going to put that up. So if there's a family member out there who has a family member who's a veteran and they're looking for some help or support or some guidance, perhaps they can call your office and you can direct them in
any veteran
to right counseling
that needs help or has earned a benefit and don't feel like they're not getting it. A lot of the veterans say, "Hey, I was promised health care, now I'm paying this or doing that." We'll fight for them and their issues, especially the veterans, because freedom's not free, and especially the young kids that are at risk. And I gotta tell you that, you know, and I just put a little plug in for them. You can't find a better person that served 2 or 3 years honorably, because I was an employer before this and had 1,000 employees, than a veteran. So I would encourage everybody to take advantage and hire a vet, because that makes a big difference.
I think that's great advice, sir.
Yeah,
I
great.
think that's
Hire
great
a vet,
advice.
and you'll get a world-class person.
I think that's great advice, and I know there's some great community leaders, businessmen, successful businessmen throughout this community who do just that, who do just what you suggested.
Hire the vet, and you know, because you're going to get, well, they're going to have a couple of years of training. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. And they're world-class young people.
Well, I want to talk about something else, but not maybe on the young people side, is that, you know, you, sir, are the representative for probably one of the oldest districts in the country. And, you know, where else would you like to retire? But, you know, Sarasota and Manatee.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful area. It's a beautiful place for, you know, to spend your retirement years. But what are you doing, or what can be done to ensure that retirement, security, and to protect that Social Security and Medicare? You know, I know that you've actually, during one of your town halls, during one of your many town halls, you actually brought down the Social Security Administrator and answered a lot of questions. And is there a need to be concerned about Social Security and Medicare?
Well, let me just say one thing. One of the neat things about living in one of the oldest communities, when I go to the local drugstore, the gal at the counter, she'll say to me, "Is there anything else I can do for you, young man?" Geez, I like that, because a lot of them are working a little bit older.
Yeah.
But the committee I'm on, we take care of Medicare and Social Security and health care. Those are the big three,
Right.
Also welfare. But I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to do, because Social Security, first off, is their money. It's not the federal government's money, and we got to make sure that's viable. And right now, it's viable to 2034, they say. But both those programs are critical programs long term. Medicare is the one where health care costs keep going up. People are living longer,
Exactly.
but we got to make sure they're saying another 8 years. But we are working together on our committee on a bipartisan basis to make sure these programs are viable a lot longer than that, not just for the current seniors or the people who are going to be taking advantage of
But
their
the ones
benefits
coming
coming up, but for their kids and grandkids, because these programs are critical. Where does someone go buy, for example, insurance when they're 65 years old? Or many times the money that they've paid in, their employers matched it. I can tell you, Manatee County or any of the districts I've got, the 3 counties that I've got, a lot of people, they get 65 for one reason or another. All they've got is their Medicare and Social Security. Right. And I hear it in their voices. And we've got to make sure they're viable long term. And that's my commitment, to make sure they are.
And you know, sir, you know, for those people who have that only to look forward to, their Medicare and their Social Security, you know, it's a very fragile position for some people, especially if you're a widow or a widower, because that's all that you can rely upon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no other additional pension or anything that people can take advantage of.
And that's not everybody, but I'd say a third are in that category. Another third have, you know, additional savings or equity in their home. But it's probably not quite enough. And then there's another third that are, for one reason or another, lucky or more secure. But the bottom line, that bottom third, I want to make sure we're there for them long term, as well as everybody else. Because, as I tell people, they paid in for 35 years as themselves personally. Their employers matched it, part of their benefit package.
Right.
We've got to make sure it's their money, that the money's there long term.
And I think that's a wise idea. You know, hearing that from you puts people at ease that you're going to be dedicating, you know, your efforts, you know, to making sure that they're covered, and Social Security is going to be a viable option for them.
Well, I'm a senior member on the Ways and Means Committee and a senior member on the Health Committee, and I've been on the Social Security's on our committee. So those are the biggest responsibilities I have. The way I look at it is seniors in terms of their benefits, Social Security and Medicare, but then also veterans. Those are the big three.
And yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head, all of those three. Now, sir, you were recently one of 8 Republicans to vote for the Bipartisan Background Checks Act. First of all, tell us what that is, and why did you support that, and why is it important?
Too much violence. You know, I know some people might be upset I took that vote, but there's too much violence in our country. I came out of Detroit, a blue-collar kid, rough neighborhood, but I've never seen the intensity we got going on today. And if someone wants a gun, we just simply, the whole background check thing was put together in the 90s,
Right.
but there's so many ways to get around it. 90% of people, we've polled it, we've looked at it, want background checks. And including gun owners, I mean, the people, NRA members, they want background checks. If you want a gun, we want to get a background check. What happened in Odessa, Texas, was a guy that couldn't pass the background check, went and bought a gun through a private individual, and he went out and killed a bunch of people. So one is one too many, but I think it's something we can do on a bipartisan basis together, Democrats and Republicans. So I'm going to make sure, try to do what I can to make sure that that happens.
And I think, sir, unfortunately, due to all these tragedies that have occurred, there's more and more people that are supporting that effort. If you see a red flag, if you need a background check, move ahead, get it done, because it'll prevent the tragedy
And I'm
that's
pro,
yet to come.
I tell people, I'm pro Second Amendment.
Sure.
I've had a very A+ rating or whatever in terms of that. But let's find, people are asking me, what are you going to do about it? Do something.
Yeah.
And
I think
that's
that's
the thing. I'm going to do what I think's right. And I'm very concerned about, when they have these kids that are being shot in schools and different things like that.
Well, and again, sir, it's a great effort to be done, because I think people want something to happen. They just, they want that kind of leadership to show them a way that we can make some advances toward curbing violence.
Yeah, and I think we can. We've got to try. It's not the only answer. There's other good things out there. The state's done some things,
right.
But I think as Congress, and people say, what about this, this, and this? But my thought is what can we get done on a bipartisan basis? That's one of the areas I think we can get done.
Now, one of the major issues that's faced this country, not for years, generations, has always been immigration. And immigration now is raising its head again. There's, at the national level, people are saying we have to build the wall, we have to keep people out. First of all, talk to us a little bit about illegal immigration, and about people coming into our country, and about what we should do about these people that are already here that are illegal. How do you see this immigration policy?
My grandparents were from Finland. They came here legally. We need immigrants. We're a land of immigrants,
right.
So I'm pro that way. But we need a process, just not anybody can show up and get in. They're talking about the other side, some people, about open borders and giving people free benefits. Well, if you look at the Central America and South America, they're all come to America. But again, it puts everybody else at risk. And that's why, I think illegal immigration is a challenge. A lot of people are moving to the border because they're so desperate where they're at. But our first obligation is to take care of Americans. And at the same time, we can be somewhat sensitive with different immigrants around the world, but we just can't have open borders. And a lot of people are pushing for that, which would be a total disaster.
And sir, I would suggest if you could name another country in the world that has open borders. If you go to Europe, there's no open borders anywhere.
If you have open borders, you lose your country. Yeah. There's no way. I mean, in today's world, there's a lot of people that we look at the different parts on the planet, and we've got, I tell people, various challenges, but we're still by far the best place on the planet. Anytime I travel overseas, and I've been to, fortunate before I got in this, I've been to 80 different countries. When I come back to the U.S., I always say a little prayer. It's the best place on the planet.
And I
want to keep it that way.
And good for you. So we're kind of winding down a little bit, and I want to give you an opportunity. But there's one last question, and I'd like for you to take at least a moment to answer it. You're the ranking member on the House Ways and Means Committee Trade Subcommittee, which oversees all trade agreements that the United States issues. It's very important. It's a very important position. I want you to talk a little bit about the USMCA, the United States, Mexico, Canada Agreement, and why that's kind of an updated to the old NAFTA thing, how it's going to protect Americans and give Americans more opportunity, but it's also more than that. It's also about intellectual property as well. So if you could, sir, just a moment or two about the importance of this agreement.
It's one of the largest free economic zones in the world between Canada, Mexico, and ourselves. I think it's $1.3 trillion in economic activities. 13 million jobs
Wow.
are supported in the U.S. as a result of that. 1 in 5 jobs in Florida is trade related, our port down the street, but all the other spin-off companies from that. So when you look at it, this is a much better and improved from the original NAFTA. I'm working with a lot of the growers, tomato growers and others, fruits and vegetables in the state. They've had some issues. So I'm working closely with them to make sure this works for them and farmers across the country. But I think it's a global community. We've got to find a way that we can compete. My job is to help our factories, because I think a lot of these agreements we've been played, is to help our companies and our jobs that get created by trade fight for them. And that's kind of the mindset I bring to it. I do think with China over the years, we've been played in some sense, obviously with Japan in terms of the trade deficits, but we've got to make sure that they'll fight for their people, we need to fight for ours. And because at the end of the day, what it really means is good paying jobs for American people.
Congressman, I wish we had a little bit more time. There's, you're such a fascinating congressman to talk to, but unfortunately, you've got other things to do and places to go. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you again, not only for taking the opportunity to say a few words and kind of fill in your constituents here, but also for that sense of community. Like I said at the very beginning, if we added up all your town halls and forums, and so you'd be in the top 10 for sure. I'm positive. Congressman Buchanan, any last words about not only the situation that's occurring up in Washington, but here in your community? What would you like your community to know?
I tell people I'm humbled to be, as a blue-collar kid, one of 6 kids in a blue-collar family, to be a member of Congress. But at the end of the day, it's about the people I represent. And my focus is always, I think of myself as a representative, not so much as a congressman, that I work for the people in these 3 congressional counties, in this congressional district. I work for them. And so if someone's got a problem with red tide, or someone's got a problem with flooding downtown, or whatever it might be, I'm going to do whatever I can to deliver and help Manatee County be even a better county, and that's my goal.
And I would say to you, sir, it's not only what you will do, it's what you have done. Yeah. And you've been committed to this community from day one, back in '07 when you were first elected. Yeah. So, Congressman Vern Buchanan, thank you very much, sir.
And thanks, Charles, for what you do for the community. The education is really critical.
Well, we'll look forward to having you back again. Maybe not, maybe a little sooner next time, because these updates are important. And I think the community really, appreciates you taking the time to fill them in on a wide variety of subjects.
And thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you for joining us on this special edition of Legislative Update. If you have any questions for Congressman Buchanan or think he can help, go to his addresses, either his Sarasota or his Manatee County office, and we'll have that information up on the screen. So you can ask your question, and I'm sure Congressman Buchanan and his very talented staff will be able to help you. So until next time, I'm Charles Clapsaddle for METV. Thank you for joining us.